Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Fallen London. Today we are going to be looking at May's exceptional story, Leviathan. That was not an interesting name. As always, at the start of a new story, I will encourage you to play this yourself. Spoilers are ahead. Get the exceptional friendship. Play these yourself. You don't just get these stories every month. You get access to the House of Chimes, you get an extra load of cards, and you get 2 candles. And without further ado, let's go on to a lecture on marine fossils. The Carpenter's granddaughter is about to give a lecture on marine fossils at Benthic College. She has a well-earned reputation for delivering captivating talks on ancient beasts. Yet tonight's audience is thin. From the restless gaggle of attendees outside the lecture theatre, you learn that her talk has been scheduled on the same evening as a university ball with an open bar. Those who have made an effort to attend have done so in evening dress and frequently check their pocket watches. Well, let's take a seat. You wish to attend her lecture, regardless of competing fixtures. You take a seat near the front of the lecture theatre, between 2 women in sequined gowns. The Carpenter's granddaughter stands behind the lectern, surrounded by drawings of fossils. The subjects of her lecture are the large marine vertebrates she excavated on the surface shortly before descending to the Neath. She is an engaging speaker, but the gaudily dressed audience is fidgety. The Carpenter's granddaughter displays a series of drawings showing the evolution of whales from hoofed land mammals. By examining the skeletons of long-dead creatures, she says, we can witness the mutability of species over time, even our own. Of course, she smiles, there is less resistance to such ideas here than on the surface. The sequin-clad women on either side of you exchange a skeptical glare. Though we can voice our agreement, it's easier to challenge established orders in the Neath than on the surface. We can contradict her assertion, scientists in the Neath actually face more scrutiny than those on the surface, or we can remain silenced. Perhaps the other attendees will be more forthcoming. See, I can see her point. Down here on the Neath, science doesn't quite work the same as it does on the surface. As we have seen. I mean, people can't die, which is kind of... well, they can die, but not of old age. Unless you count the tomb colonies. Okay, well, maybe I'll take that back, but things are different. Let's voice our agreement. You concur, pointing out that since London's populace have experienced rather a lot of change in recent years, they're receptive to more of it. That's certainly the conclusion I've drawn, replies the Carpenter's granddaughter. When the fundamental ideas underpinning one's existence have been so thoroughly dismantled, one wants to understand the real state of affairs, not cling to old superstitions. Of course, as a scientist, I am biased, she says, with a grin. Okay, interesting. The lecture ends. As the rest of the attendees hurry to the ball, the Carpenter's granddaughter waves you over. I don't suppose you'd like to join me for a drink at the Green Whale? We could talk more about marine paleontology. Or, he gives you a conspiratorial smile. Iconoclasm in the Neath, if you fancy. Well, let's accompany us to the Green Whale. It may prove interesting. The Green Whale is an effervescent pub not far from the university. Its patrons are a mix of Benthic and Somerset types, and the air is thick with good-natured debate. The Carpenter's granddaughter orders a bottle of the second cheapest wine, shoulders her way to a secluded table beneath a stuffed shark, and beckons you over. She is interested in your opinions, as she is in her own, which have been shaped by her unconventional life and inquisitive mind. The discussion is vigorous and thoroughly unpleasant. We got a free bottle of Greyfields. The carpenter's granddaughter leans back in her chair and considers you. Her cheeks flushed from wine and conversation. I know we've only just met, but... She hesitates. How would you feel about joining me on a research trip to the Gant Pole? It's a place beneath the Z where Leviathans go to die. I was planning to make the journey alone, but after this evening, I'd really like you to come. Discuss ideas with me. Notice things I miss. Oh, we have visited the Gant Pole in sunless seas. Lovely place. Full of strange naked men. So we can ask her what she is hoping to find at the Gant Pole. Dead Leviathans, presumably. How did she learn about the Gant Pole? What sources exist on such a place? Or who is funding this trip? Research expeditions are not free. Let's ask her what she wants to find there. There is something at the Gant Pole which attracts Z-beasts at the end of their lives, replies the carpenter's granddaughter. If they have been coming there to die for long enough, we should find their fossilized remains. I'm hoping those will teach us something about the evolution of sea life. She considers the empty wine bottle. We wouldn't be the first people to visit the pole. There's a colony of haruspices there. They perform rituals on the Leviathans during their death throes. However, they have no interest in the long dead, so we should be able to stay out of each other's way. Interesting. Let's ask her, how did she learn about the Gant Pole? An esoteric source. The carpenter's granddaughter retrieves a dog-eared tome from her satchel. It's the only good source on the Gant Pole from a paleontological perspective. Well, any perspective, really. And it's out of print. But it's full of fascinating ideas, even if they are outlandish and dubiously cited. You can borrow it. I know it off by heart. I should tell you, the author was influenced by my mother's work. The book's veneration of her probably has something to do with its allure for me. But sometimes it's best not to examine one's own motives too closely. She grins and taps her head. Here be dragons. Okay, so we got the iconoclastic professor's thesis. Interesting. And who is funding this trip? A very important question. I've applied for funding from the university, sighs the carpenter's granddaughter. Several times. Ultimately, the venture is too risky. Little is known about the Gant Pole. The voyage is dangerous, and there's a chance that there aren't even any fossils there, just carcasses. So I'm paying for the trip myself. She absent-mindedly smooths her threadbare cloak. Still, she continues, brightening, if I gather enough information, it'll make me a better candidate for future funding. A valid point. Well, we are definitely going to agree to accompany her to the Gant Pole. This will advance the story. Ensure you've learned all you wish. I'm so glad, says the carpenter's granddaughter, beaming. I'd resigned myself to going alone, but it would be so much better with you there. What would you like in return? So we can ask for research credit, you desire recognition, or we can have a cut of the profit. You wish to be compensated. I think I'm going to go with research credit. As much as I like money. Go research credit. Of course, exclaims the carpenter's granddaughter. I'm scarcely in this line of work for the glory, she laughs. But there is something affirming about attaching one's name to research one believes in. I hope we learn enough for the Gant Pole for our work to gain some recognition at the university. There you go, grows a little more certain of the merits of the publication. I suppose we ought to call it a night, says the carpenter's granddaughter, casting her gaze around the emptying pub. When you're ready to leave for the Gant Pole, meet me at the Wolfstack Docks, Old Bucker's Passage. All you need to bring is yourself. You can bid her farewell. You will see her again soon. As you leave the Green Whale, you turn to wave at the carpenter's granddaughter, but she is assisting a student who has availed himself of altogether too much wine. Very kind. A shadowy dock anywhere in London. Here it is. The carpenter's granddaughter is waiting for you beside an unassuming steamer. Behind her, a flock of white-haired figures shamble up the gangplank. "Old sailors," she whispers as you approach. "Leviathans aren't the only creatures who are drawn to the Gant Pole at the end of their lives." That would be the naked old man I was talking about. Board the vessel. It is waiting for you. You'll be unable to return for London for some time. The steamer chugs away from the dock, and your gaze drifts towards the wheelhouse. As soon as the captain sees you looking in, he pulls his cap low over his eyes, slams the wheelhouse door, and locks it. "That's the last we'll be seeing of him, I suspect," the carpenter's granddaughter says with a grin. "Driving beneath the sea isn't completely legal, and he's not keen on conversation. Come on, let's go below. I've got some fungal crackers we can share." Wonderful. The old sailors huddle cross-legged upon the hold's rusty floor, beside a forest of incongruously shiny pipes. The carpenter's granddaughter notices you looking at the plumbing. "I believe those pipes help the vessel dive beneath the sea, but we'll find out for sure soon enough. In the meantime, let's have something to eat." He drags 2 battered chairs up to a table, opens a box of fungal crackers, and gestures for you to sit down. We have a few options here. We can read the iconoclast professor's thesis. What does he have to say for himself? Maybe we'll start at the top and work our way down. So let's start by just reading the thesis. For an academic work, the iconoclastic professor's thesis is oddly rapturous. Entire passages are devoted to the sensual turn of the plesiosaurus flippers. Elsewhere, the author urges you to consider the incomparable beauty of the sclerotic rings that frame the ichthyosaur's eyes. Later chapters argue that since species can evolve across many lifetimes, so humans should strive to transcend their mammalian corpus within their own. The iconoclastic professor advocates the use of red science for this purpose. "You may have some sense of why this book is no longer in print," says the carpenter's granddaughter, with a raised eyebrow. "I don't think the Ministry of Public Decency are going to like that book very much." We ask about her mother, or shall we carry on with what the red science is? Let's ask what red science is. The iconoclastic professor's thesis mentions it. It's a taboo. Should have seen that coming. "It's not science, as I understand it," says the carpenter's granddaughter. "Rather, it is a forbidden means of transcending one's place on the great chain." She draws a pattern in the cracker crumbs with a finger. The great chain is a hierarchy of every living thing, upheld by beings called judgments. I have no idea what they are or why they care, but I've heard they can't see what goes on in the Neath. Still, it's apparently unwise to defy them. She laughs. "It sounds like superstition, doesn't it? My mother would have had very little patience with it." Ah, we know about the judgments because of sunless skies. We can share our thoughts on the Great Chain. The carpenter's granddaughter appreciates your opinions. Many scientists wish their work could exist in a vacuum, muses the carpenter's granddaughter. But all discoveries have implications. I've often wondered, when reading that book, she nods at the iconoclastic professor's thesis, whether I should use red science to break the Great Chain, if such an opportunity arose. Oh, we have 3 options here, and this is going to influence her. It is not for creatures such as us to disrupt the hierarchy. There are implications we are not equipped to understand. Or creatures should be able to determine their own fate. There should be no limitations on that. Now, purely hypothetically, creatures should be able to determine their own fates, but we have a broader understanding that defying a judgment probably ends badly. Let's give the matter some more thought. I want to think about this. Take some time to decide. Let's ask her where the iconoclastic professor is now. What happened after he published his theses? I actually asked around the bone market, replies the carpenter's granddaughter. No one's seen him for years. Most people think he attracted the wrong kind of attention for his advocacy of red science. But there are other rumours. I've heard he went mad and threw himself in the sea, stole equipment from the masters and went into hiding. And he was killed by vigilantes after kidnapping one of his students. She flips to the back of the iconoclastic professor's theses and shows you his photograph. I think he just fell into obscurity after running out of money. She sighs. Seems fair. We offer some crackers to the old sailors. They look like they could use a good meal. Let's do it. See if they say anything interesting. All of the old sailors ignore you except one, who takes a cracker between long nailed fingers and nibbles it through her curtain of white hair. Another life, he wheezes, crumbs falling into her lap. Many think the old sailors travel to the Gant Pole in search of rest, says the carpenter's granddaughter in a tactful whisper. But the book suggests they are seeking transcendence. I'd like to believe the latter. I cannot imagine ever wanting to just rest. Not everyone gets the chance to grow old. She fingers the worn fabric of her cloak. Ooh. There is a sunken clank from somewhere deep within the vessel, and the table jolts, scattering crumbs onto the floor. The old sailors do not react even as the pipes start to rattle, but the carpenter's granddaughter glances at the porthole. We must be about to dive, she says nervously. Let's look out the porthole. How will the steamer submerge? You dash across the vibrating floor to the porthole and peer towards the bow. A copper shell is scraping over the steamer, transforming it. One can only hope into a watertight submarine. Don't worry, shouts the carpenter's granddaughter over the metallic screech. The captain's done this many times before, or so he assured me. Once the shell has fully encased the vessel, save a rubber-sealed opening for the porthole, the pipes stop rattling and begin to hiss. The floor pitches forward as the submarine dives, and the porthole goes black. You are beneath the Z. Means we're getting very close, apparently. Let's ask about her mother. She has mentioned her. Until I was 14, I didn't realize the woman who raised me was my mother, says the carpenter's granddaughter. Everyone said she was my unmarried aunt. She finally told me on the beach at Lyme Regis while we were searching for ammonites. She'd been waiting until I was old enough to understand. Her life was unconventional enough, being a fossil hunter. Acknowledging me would have put her work at risk. Our family wasn't rich, so I could have ended up in an orphanage, she sighs. I'm just happy I spent as much time with her as I did. Let's ask the carpenter's granddaughter why she came to the Neath. She gave up her life on the surface. Paleontology's about digging, so it seemed logical to just keep going down. laughs the carpenter's granddaughter. I'm serious. The deeper we dig, the further back in time we see, and the more we learn about our own existence. My mother's discoveries made people confront the fact that species could become extinct. If it happened to the Plesiosaurus, it could, probably will, happen to us. Even down here in the Neath, where the rules are different. Time doesn't stop. She puts a hand on your sleeve. Sorry, I forget not everyone finds that as comforting as I do. Oh, so before we can leave, we have to discuss our thoughts on the Great Chain. So what do we believe? Do we believe that it is not for creatures such as us to disrupt the hierarchy, or that creatures should be able to determine their own fate? I guess I'm going to go with their own fate. It's probably a bad idea, and I'm sure it's going to end up with somebody exploding, but we'll find out. She agrees, if only in theory. See, now that is my kind of debate. Quite. It is also wise to consider who benefits from established systems, says the carpenter's granddaughter. It's generally those who control them. Still, she examines her short fingernails. Breaking the chain involves red science, and that involves altering the body in ways most people cannot conceive. It requires some kind of arcane understanding. Whoever possessed that expertise would hold power over those who did not, and that's scarcely better than having an immutable system in the first place. Exactly. Very smart. Let's disembark at the Gant Pole. You have arrived. I think we've done everything we want to do, so yes. Water sluices over the porthole as the submarine surfaces in a pocket of air. The captain opens the hold with a clank, and the old sailors shuffle out. As you follow them off the gangplank, the carpenter's granddaughter grabs your arm. It's a heart, she gasps. We're inside one of the ventricles. Look! She points to the cavernous ceiling, an expanse of fibrous stone that was once muscle. The ground beneath your feet is slick with dark liquid, and the air is ferrous. The Gant Pole entrance chamber. You are not alone at the Gant Pole. A withered man splashes out of an artery towards the submarine. He pays no heed to you, but upon catching sight of the carpenter's granddaughter, his eyes bulge. Tentatively, he reaches out for the sleeve of her tartan cloak, but she shrinks from him, drawing it around her shoulders. He stares at her for a moment, as if searching for something, but then his eyes lose focus. He returns to what was clearly his intended task, shepherding the old sailors towards the artery he just emerged from. They comply without hesitation. Perhaps they were expecting such a reception. I'm guessing he thought the cloak was the carpenter's granddaughter's mother. There we go. What did he want with the carpenter's granddaughter? Surely not her cloak. It's seen better days. The carpenter's granddaughter takes the iconoclastic professor's theses and hurriedly leafs to the author's photograph. The man you just encountered was many years older, but the resemblance is undeniable. He must have recognized my cloak. My mother was painted wearing it, she frowns. Perhaps he didn't make the connection. He looked vague, not all there. Whatever draws creatures here near the end of their lives might have a sophoric effect over time. Still, we should avoid attracting his attention, even if those rumors I heard about him going mad and kidnapping people are not completely true. We are still vulnerable here. Yeah, his professor's suspicions have been aroused. Oh dear, we are going to have to try and avoid him, I feel. We need to learn about two things. says the Carpenter's granddaughter. The Z creatures themselves and any anthropological concerns that might affect future research expeditions. According to our friend's book, he holds up the iconoclast professor's theses, there's a Leviathan Graveyard where we can examine the creatures. For anthropological information, we should go deeper into the heart to see where he's taking the old sailors and find out what those haruspices are up to. He looks around nervously. Wherever we go, we must not linger too long. I don't want to risk him discovering us. Discuss the professor. How much of a threat does he actually present? An hour ago, I thought that if he was still alive, he'd be no more than a harmless London eccentric, says the Carpenter's granddaughter. But encountering him here makes me nervous. This is a man who was publicly advocated red science, and was rumoured to have stolen equipment from the masters for the purpose of carrying it out. Now we find him ushering old sailors into a cave. I don't like it. We should try to stay out of his way, she says grimly. If he suspects us of spying on him, he might wish to stop us leaving. So we can visit the Leviathan Graveyard. What happens to the Z creatures that come here to die? The Carpenter's granddaughter leads you into a vein that coils downward around the circumference of the heart. According to the book, the graveyard is this way, she says in a low voice. As you descend, your footsteps reverberate off the stone walls. It sounds like there's someone following us, but I think it's just an echo, she whispers uncertainly. Skeletons the size of churches tower over you, their vaulted ribs scraping the ceiling. A midnight wail, gasps the Carpenter's granddaughter. And there, the jaws of a behemoth moustache. And a thalt's beak. She runs her finger along a vertebra, as tall as she is. No doubt our friend knows the graveyard well. We should learn what we need to, and leave as soon as possible. Right, let's examine a skull. It is in the middle of the graveyard. The whale's skull is the size of a carriage. Its bowed jaws arc gracefully, inviting you to step inside. The Carpenter's granddaughter looks at it with unease. Time is of the essence. You can only choose to examine it one way. So we can examine the skull from the outside. There is much you can learn from observation alone, or we can examine the skull from the inside. You'll need to climb in through its jaws. So the second one risks arousing the iconoclast professor's suspicions. Is that if I fail the shadowy check that I have 100% on? Let's examine the skull from the inside. I want to know what's going to happen. You step gingerly through the arched jaws. They are pitted with tooth sockets. This makes little sense, says the Carpenter's granddaughter, following you in. Whales with arched jaws like this should use baleen bristles to filter water for food. But this one had teeth. They kind of worked. See how the jaws don't even meet? As you clamber out of the mouth, the Carpenter's granddaughter flips a sparkling object towards you. Found it in a molar, she says. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but it looks like a filling. We got an ostentatious diamond. Wonderful. Who knew it's always worth crawling around on the inside of whales' skulls? Let's examine a flipper. It is atop of a pile of bone. A skeletal flipper is draped over a vertiginous pile of bones. That flipper's not from any species I'm familiar with, alive or extinct, says the Carpenter's granddaughter, her brow furrowed. We have to learn more. So we can yet again, we can look from a distance, or we can take a sample. I'm going to take a sample because that seems to be the more rewarding way of doing things. This will yield valuable information. It risks arousing the iconoclastic professor's suspicion. We'll have to climb onto a mountain of bones. Doesn't that sound fun? It has the same number of phalanges, finger bones, as a human hand, says the carpenter's granddaughter. And look, she points at the tip. The distal phalanx still has some flesh on it. You scale the mountain of bones like a ladder. By some miracle, none slip, and you remove the distal phalanx, a nub of bone larger than your hand. Its remaining flesh resembles cured meat, and there is a translucent disc the size of a saucer stuck to it. It's a fingernail, gasps the carpenter's granddaughter when you give it to her. Right, so it is a human? That's strange. The carpenter's granddaughter's research increases in value. The final thing here is we can examine the corpse. You can smell it from the other side of the cavern. The corpse, bloated with rot, festers in a corner. Though human-sized, it resembles a drunk's drawing of a Leviathan. Judging by the smell, it's been here for a while, says the carpenter's granddaughter in a muffled voice that she covers her nose with her cloak. Oh no. So we can examine the corpse from a distance. There is much you can learn from observation alone, yes indeed. Or we can closely examine the body. You'll need to brave the smell. Well, in for a penny. We've closely examined all the others, so... Half of the creature's body is mouth. Surely, he could never have swum. And is that hair? You squint through watering eyes at its throat. There is a slash across it. That's strange, Carpenter's granddaughter says through her cloak. The haruspices slice open Leviathan abdomens to examine their entrails, but it looks like this creature was executed. You venture closer, breathing into your elbow. Clasped in the creature's jaws are the remains of its last meal. A specimen, the carpenter's granddaughter says, pinching her nose. Do we have a specimen jar? No, we do have a deep Z catch now. Lovely. Let's discuss our findings with the carpenter's granddaughter. What can you conclude? There are Leviathan remains here with human features, says the carpenter's granddaughter. Cetaceans evolved from land mammals, but that took millions of years. The remains here are fresh. She casts a look at the bloated corpse. Relatively. It can only come about via unnatural means. Deliberate manipulation. She sighs. If I publish my research, it might encourage others to do something like this, or worse. So we have two options. She should not worry about that. It is her role to provide knowledge, not prescribe what is done with it. And what she has seen here should give her pause. It might be best not to provide inspiration for those who would abuse science. Now, we all know that science cannot be hidden. Knowledge should not be hidden. It should just be not used badly. So she shouldn't worry about that. I try to be impartial, the carpenter's granddaughter sighs, but it unnerves me that someone may be manipulating people's bodies. Still, does that make it wrong? People often fear what they do not understand. I only have to look at the resistance to my mother's findings to see that. Besides, there may be wise reasons for giving people flippers, or giant mouths. I can't think of any, of course. He smiles, which is probably for the best, but I should remain open to the possibility. Come on, let's get back to the entrance chamber. Now, I could explore the heart, but I think we are coming up to where I should end the episode. I have been enjoying this far too much. Coming to the Gant Pole. And, my episode has run a little longer than normal, so I am going to thank you all very much for being here. Hopefully you enjoyed the story as much as I did. And please like, subscribe, let me know what you think. Your comments are greatly appreciated. And as always, I'll see you next time.